There's a kind of static in the air tonight that the office can't quite swallow. The desk lamp hums a little too loudly, its light pooling over weather maps and radar prints while the blinds lift and settle as if they're listening for something. Papers on my desk breathe in tiny gusts from under the door, and the air has that heavy, expectant feel, like a held breath stretched over the city. I sit with my coffee going cold, pen hovering over the open file, knowing that somewhere beyond the glass, a sky full of growing thunderstorms is finally breaking that tension with thunder and lightning, while in here I'm sorting through my own, one case file at a time. Good evening. If we haven't met yet, I'm Madeline Rowe, an astrophysicist turned private eye, trading telescope time for case files and calm explanations. Tonight, I'm on loan to the weather desk at the local forecast office, parked at a corner table piled with storm reports, radar loops, and scribbled notes on how the sky decides when to breathe out rain. Tonight's investigation is a stormy one, filed under rising air and falling water, under clouds that build themselves into brief electric lives and then quietly unravel again. So settle in close, let the room grow softer around the edges, and we'll open the folder on thunderstorms together, slowly, patiently, one gentle page at a time. And just one more thing before we start. If these case files help you drift off, you might want to subscribe so the next quiet investigation finds you on its own. That way, whenever there's a new storm on my desk or a new calm mystery to unravel, it'll be waiting for you by the time you're ready to sleep. Hopefully by this point you're comfortable, settled into a chair, or the bed, or the couch where you are listening from, letting the rest of the world go a little soft around the edges. Because tonight we will stretch the life of a storm with calm, patient narration. Every stage, every breath of rising air, every fading rumble. Because every thunderstorm, even the smallest one, has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And when we slow it down, it stops feeling like something to brace against and starts feeling like something you can just observe from a warm, safe room with your eyes drifting closed. Now, let us open the file and step into the first page. Tonight's storm does not begin with lightning. It begins with air. Invisible, patient, and everywhere. Picture a broad, flat landscape under a summer sun. Fields, maybe, a few trees, a quiet town. All day long, the ground has been warming under sunlight, handing that heat back into the air near the surface. The air closest to the ground has become warm and moist, thick with evaporated water from soil, plants, and distant bodies of water. Meteorologists call this a reservoir, a store of potential energy. If you could see it, that low layer would shimmer faintly. The warmest patches of air are a little like helium balloons. They want to rise, but the atmosphere is layered, and not every rising bubble makes it very far. Some bump into a warmer layer above and slide sideways, defeated. Others are just cool enough that they lose their buoyancy and sink back down. These are failed attempts, quiet rehearsals. What our storm needs is a parcel of air that is both warm and moist, and that gets just enough help to keep rising. Maybe the help comes from a gentle boundary where cooler air from last night's rain has spread out, maybe from an outflow of another fading storm many kilometers away, maybe from air being pushed up a gentle slope or along the leading edge of a front. The exact trigger is small, almost invisible at human scale. But for one particular patch of air, it is enough. Down near the ground, that little patch begins to rise. It cools as it ascends, expanding into lower pressure. At first, it is still warmer than its surroundings, so it keeps going. Higher, higher still. And then, somewhere overhead, it reaches the level where the water vapor inside it begins to condense into tiny droplets. Latent heat is released, giving the parcel a little extra push. This is where our storm really, truly begins. From below, if you were standing out in the field, you would see almost nothing at first. Then a small tuft of white, like a smudge of chalk in the blue. This is our developing cumulus cloud, the first visible sign that the atmosphere is starting to organize itself. It looks peaceful, and it is just a quiet beginning. Meteorologists call this the towering cumulus stage, the growing phase, the upward breath of the storm. The air inside the cloud continues to rise. Droplets condense, releasing more heat and fueling the updraft. From a distance, the cloud swells upward, its top billowing into cauliflower shapes, edges smooth and rounded, white in the sun, grey and soft beneath. The base is flat, pinned to the level where condensation begins. The top reaches higher and higher into the sky. Inside, tiny droplets are riding the updraft like slow elevators. Some freeze into ice crystals higher up where the air is much colder. Some remain as supercooled liquid. Everything is in motion, yet from the ground it looks almost still, just gently blooming. There is no rain yet, no thunder, only upward motion. If you were watching from my window with me, you would see the top of the cloud keep reforming. The old towers unravel, their droplets drifting away. New towers burst upward from the centre, feeding on that warm air below. The storm is drawing breath, a deep, slow inhale from the surface of the earth. This stage can last for a while, especially on a warm afternoon with plenty of moisture. Clouds build and fade, some collapsing back into the background sky, others persisting and growing taller. Our storm is one of the persistent ones. Its updraft finds a path all the way up to the top of the troposphere. When it finally reaches a stable layer, the cloud top spreads outward, forming a flat anvil shape that stretches downwind. A wide, delicate canopy, catching the last light of the afternoon. Beneath that spreading top, something is changing. The storm is about to grow up. You can rest here for a moment, if you like, just lingering with this tall, bright tower of cloud, balanced between quiet and activity. When the first raindrops finally fall, the storm enters its mature stage. This is the heart of its life. In the upper parts of the cloud, droplets and ice particles have been colliding, merging, and growing heavier. Some have become large raindrops, some soft hailstones, or graupel. When they become too heavy for the rising air to support, they begin to fall back down through the cloud. As they descend, they drag air with them. This is the downdraft. Cool, rain-laden air accelerating downward through the storm. Now, updraft and downdraft coexist. Warm air still feeds in, rising and condensing. Cooler air sinks, giving back the water it has carried. Viewed from the side, the storm becomes a kind of engine. Air in, air out. A loop of motion, visible as curtains of rain trailing from the darkened base. At the ground, you feel it as a sudden change. A gust front arrives first, that leading edge of cool air spilling out ahead of the rain. Leaves ripple. Dust lifts into little spirals and then is pinned flat by the wind. The smell of wet pavement arrives before the drops themselves. Then the rain comes, first in scattered heavy drops, then in a steadier sheet. The room where you are listening stays dry and safe, just the faint patter against a window in your imagination. This is when the storm is at its most organised. Inside the cloud, strong updrafts can tilt and separate the paths of rising and falling air. In some storms, that separation helps them live longer and become severe. In others, like our modest single cell, the patterns are simpler, but the physics is the same. Rising warm air fuels the storm. Falling cool air and rain begin to undercut it. The balance will not last forever. Lightning begins to flicker in the cloud. Not the loud crashing strikes of a dramatic storm, but occasional distant flashes. High in the cloud, collisions between ice particles and droplets have separated electric charges. Positive charges accumulate in one region, negative charges in another. Eventually, the imbalance is too great, and a lightning discharge races through, restoring the balance for a moment. From our calm vantage point, we see a brief glow inside the cloud, then a gentle roll of thunder that follows. Thunder is just the sound of compressed air relaxing again, the atmosphere reacting to the sudden heating along the lightning channel. But we do not have to think of it as violent. Tonight it is a distant voice, low and soft, like a drum heard from several streets away. By the time it reaches you, it has already lost its sharp edges. Our storm may produce a few stronger gusts, or a brief burst of heavier rain. It might test the line between ordinary and severe, flirting with hail or a stronger wind. But the important part for sleep is this: the processes are the same in quiet storms and in intense ones. Warm air rises, moisture condenses, rain falls, charges separate and discharge, and eventually the fuel runs out. For now, though, we linger in the mature stage. Rain on the window, soft gusts against a door, a sky carved into bright cloud tops and shadowed cores. This is the middle chapter of our storm's life. You are free to drift if you wish. The storm will go on breathing with or without you. Eventually, the same cool air that brought you relief also begins to smother the storm's own engine. This is the beginning of the dissipating stage. The downdraft spreads out along the ground like a shallow, cool lake of air. It undercuts the warm, moist inflow that had been feeding the updraft. The rising motion weakens. Fewer droplets are carried upward. The cloud's highest towers stop building and begin to erode. The anvil thins and frays at the edges. Rain continues for a while, but more gently now. The heavy, drumming downpour softens into a steady patter, then into sporadic showers. Lightning becomes less frequent. Thunder grows fainter, its rumble stretched out and distant. You might barely notice the last few flashes, hidden deep inside the remnants of the cloud. From the ground, the base of the cloud lifts. The dark underside brightens as the rain curtain thins. The once solid core now looks hollowed out, almost translucent in places. The storm is losing its structure, giving itself back to the larger sky. Its life as a single organized system is coming to a close. If you stepped outside after, the air would feel different, cooler, certainly, carrying the scent of wet earth, leaves, and pavement. Surfaces would glisten. Tiny rivulets would trace their way along curbs and into drains. Birds might begin to call again from nearby trees, testing the quiet. The loudest sound might just be dripping. An ordinary single-cell thunderstorm, like the one we have just followed, often lives for only 20 or 30 minutes from first drop to last. In real time, that is not very long, but stretched out into this slow retelling, it becomes a whole story, a beginning, an active middle, and a gentle end. You could fall asleep here with one small storm completed. If you are already drifting, that is exactly enough. If you're still awake, we can quietly open the next pages of the file and look up from this one storm to the wider family it belongs to. Our storm was a single cell, a solitary updraft growing, raining and fading on its own, but it is rarely alone in the sky. On a summer afternoon over the plains, dozens or hundreds of such cells can blossom. Some never make it past the cumulus stage. They puff up, falter and vanish. Others mature just enough to rain lightly on a single neighbourhood, then dissolve in the next 20 minutes. These are often called pulse storms, quick pulses of convection in the vast, breathing atmosphere. Sometimes, though, storms arrange themselves into clusters. Picture a handful of cells, each in a different stage of the life cycle, grouped together like a small constellation. One cell is building, all bright towers and crisp outlines. Another is raining hard, with a dark base and active lightning. A third is already dissipating, its rain falling lighter, its shape softening and fraying. Together, these cells behave like a small organism, feeding on shared outflows and boundaries. As the downdrafts from older cells spread out, they can lift new air into the sky, seeding fresh updrafts just downwind. In this way, the cluster can maintain itself, birthing new cells as old ones fade. The lifetime of the whole group can be much longer than any one storm inside it. The pattern marches slowly along, leaving behind a trail of wet ground and cooling air. From far above, a weather satellite would see it as a slowly evolving patch of cold, high cloud tops. From your pillow, it is a long, gentle series of showers, with breaks of quiet in between. On some days, clusters grow even more organized, forming lines of storms along fronts and boundaries. These can stretch for hundreds of kilometers, a bowed or straight line of convective cells, linked by shared outflows and an extended region of lift. They march across the landscape like slow-moving trains, their leading edges defined by gust fronts and rain curtains. We call these squall lines, or more broadly, mesoscale convective systems, a complicated name for a simple idea. Many storm lives, overlapping and intertwined. Tonight, we do not need the technical details. It is enough to think of the sky as a big, evolving tapestry of cells, clusters, and lines, each one living its own short life. Some breathe in the afternoon, some through the evening. Some persist through the night, glowing faintly with distant lightning while most people sleep beneath them. Where you are, you only meet one piece of that tapestry tapestry at a time. And even that can be more than enough. In the central United States, where broad plains stretch to the horizon, thunderstorms are frequent summer residents. Researchers there have spent years watching storms come and go, carefully reconstructing their life cycles. They use networks of weather radar to track where and when storms first appear. They watch how long they persist, how far they travel, and whether they meet the criteria for being called severe. Severe, in meteorology, has a particular meaning. It usually involves hail of a certain size, strong gusts of wind, or tornadoes. But under all these labels, the heart of the storm is still that simple updraft and downdraft loop. Rising warm air, falling cool air, water cycling between vapor, droplets, and ice. When scientists look at many summers' worth of storms over the central plains, patterns appear. Most isolated storms are short-lived, lasting on the order of tens of minutes. A smaller fraction organize into longer-lived systems, surviving for hours as they feed on larger-scale boundaries and winds. These long-lived systems can travel across multiple states overnight, raining on counties that were sunny and clear an afternoon earlier. From the ground, this feels like a quiet shift. Clouds thickening after sunset, distant flickers on the horizon that slowly draw near. By the time the line reaches you, the day has already ended. You meet the storms as they are, and not as they began. There are patterns in when storms tend to begin as well. Many warm season storms over land form in the late afternoon and early evening, when surface heating has peaked and the atmosphere is most unstable. Others are triggered by boundaries that form earlier in the day and only blossom into storms later, after travelling some distance. By midnight, the character of the sky can be completely different from what it was at noon. Where there was harsh sunlight and bare ground, there is now a deck of clouds, slow rain, and steadily cooling air. A long exhale after the day's heat. When you lie down to sleep on a summer night in one of those regions, you are often sharing the hours with entire families of storms that have been travelling and evolving all evening. They are not random. They follow quiet, repeatable rhythms. And you, tucked in with the sound of rain on the roof, are simply listening to one of those rhythms play out. Thunderstorms in other parts of the world have their own habits and accents. In India, for example, pre-monsoon thunderstorms can blossom in the warm season before the full monsoon arrives. Here too, researchers have watched carefully, documenting not just the storms themselves, but the subtle pressure features that accompany them at the surface. Ahead of a squall line, a small area of lower pressure can form, called a mesolow. Behind the line, as cold air spreads out, a small high-pressure area can develop, a meso-high. Farther in the wake of the system, a narrow region of slightly lower pressure again can appear, a wake low. These features are small compared to large weather systems, but they shape the winds and the feel of the air as storms pass. Delicate fingerprints on the barometer that tell of rising and sinking air overhead. From a human perspective, these storms might be known by local names, associated with particular months, particular times of day, particular smells and sounds. Hot, hazy afternoons, when air seems to vibrate above the ground. Towering clouds building on the horizon. A sudden wind, a burst of rain, and then softer showers as the storm moves away. Different continent, different culture. Same basic life cycle of a thunderstorm, breathing heat back into the sky. Wherever you are as you listen to this the details may differ. But the pattern is universal. Warm, moist air rising, clouds building, rain falling, air cooling and spreading out, ready to be warmed again another day. A quiet cycle that goes on, whether you are awake to watch it or sleeping peacefully beneath it. If we zoom in even further inside the cloud itself, the storm's life is written in the tiniest droplets. This is the microphysics of our case file. When rising air first becomes saturated, condensation begins on tiny particles suspended in the atmosphere. These can be bits of dust, salt from the ocean, or small particles from vegetation or human activity. Water molecules cling to these seeds, forming droplets so small you could not see them individually. Together, though, they become visible as cloud, a soft white volume in the sky, millions upon millions of droplets floating together. As the updraft carries these droplets upward, they sometimes collide and merge, growing larger. In warmer parts of the cloud, this collision and coalescence can slowly build raindrops big enough to fall. Higher up, where temperatures are below freezing, droplets can freeze onto small ice crystals or frozen seeds, building soft hail called graupel. Each path is a slightly different way of assembling precipitation, but the underlying motions are the same: upward, then downward, cooling, then warming again as particles descend into thicker, warmer air. You can imagine thousands of tiny journeys taking place inside the cloud while we watch from the ground. A droplet forms on a particle, rides the updraft, freezes, collects more ice, then starts to fall. On its way down, it passes through warmer layers and begins to melt, becoming a raindrop. Finally, it falls through the base of the cloud and into the air beneath, joining countless others on their way to the ground. By the time it reaches you, it is one small part of the rain streaking down your window or pattering on the roof. All of these micro-physical processes return water to the surface and release heat high in the atmosphere. In that sense, a thunderstorm is a vertical conveyor belt, moving energy and moisture upward, then returning water downward again. It is not just a sound or a spectacle. It is one of the ways the planet balances its own energy, day after day, season after season. A small local event for you. A steady, quiet contribution to the global circulation for the atmosphere as a whole. As you listen, you do not need to hold all these details in your mind. They can pass by like droplets themselves, forming, rising, falling away, leaving only the overall impression of a system that knows how to take care of its own balances while you rest. Now let us wander even closer to the mystery of lightning, not to make it sharp or frightening, only to see how this sudden brightness fits into the slow life of the storm. Deep within the cloud, where updrafts carry ice and droplets upward and downdrafts carry them down, collisions are constantly happening. Tiny ice crystals brush against larger graupel pellets. Some of these collisions knock a few charges from one particle to another, very small exchanges happening over and over again. But small things add up. Over time, whole regions of the cloud become slightly positive, while others grow slightly negative. The electric field inside the storm strengthens, invisible but real. The air itself resists the flow of charge, acting like an insulator. But after enough separation has built up, the field becomes strong enough to break that resistance. A lightning discharge forms, often starting as a faint stepped leader exploring paths through the air. When it finally finds a route, a bright return stroke rushes along the channel, equalizing charges in a fraction of a second. Most lightning never touches the ground at all. It dances from cloud to cloud, or from one part of a cloud to another. Intracloud flashes, spidering through the interior of the storm, lighting it from within like a lantern. If you have ever seen a storm far away on the horizon at night, you may have watched this silent show. Clouds pulsing gently, no thunder audible where you stand. Just distant, soft illumination. When lightning does reach the ground, it often follows a winding, branching path downward, while the return stroke travels upward along that path. From a distance, it looks like a single, clean line. Up close, it is a complex branching channel, finding its way through microscopic variations in the air. The thunder you hear afterward is the atmosphere's answer. Air is heated very rapidly along the channel, then expands and sends out a pressure wave that we perceive as sound. By the time it reaches a quiet, closed room, it is mostly a low, rolling murmur. Around the world, lightning helps maintain what scientists call the global electric circuit. The planet itself carries a fair weather electric field, with charges slowly leaking through clear air from the ionosphere down towards the ground. Thunderstorms act as natural generators, pumping charge back upward. Storm by storm, flash by flash, the atmosphere gently recharges itself. On a human timescale, this is almost impossibly slow and subtle. On the storm's timescale, it is simply one more part of its life. So when you see a flash, or think of one now as you lie back and listen, you can think of it as the storm's way of reorganizing its own energy. Not anger, not drama. Just the brief, bright punctuation mark in a long, otherwise quiet story of rising and falling air. A quick adjustment in the cloud's electric bookkeeping, and then back to the steady business of rain and cooling. Now imagine an entire storm day seen in slow time, from the first hint of instability in the morning to the last drying leaves after sunset. In the early morning, before the sun is high, the air near the ground is relatively cool. Any storms that formed overnight may still be fading, trailing thin sheets of rain as their energy drains away. Cloud tops sag. Lightning flickers less and less. The main thing you would feel is a gentle, damp stillness. The atmosphere pressing the reset button after the night's activity. As the sun climbs, it begins to warm the surface again. Fields, pavement, forests, and rooftops all absorb light and release heat back into the air. The lowest layers of the atmosphere start to mix. You might see small, flat-bottomed clouds appear by late morning. These are fair weather cumulus, little cotton puffs marking upward motions that are just strong enough to reach the condensation level. They darken and brighten as they cycle, but most never become storms. By afternoon, if the day is ripe for thunderstorms, some of those clouds begin to grow taller. Their tops no longer spread out and vanish. Instead, they billow upward in crisp towers, showing that the air aloft is colder and the rising parcels are buoyant. The fair weather cumulus give way to congestus clouds, taller, more vigorous, with sharper edges. Some of these will still fail, but a few will keep going, pushing high enough to become cumulonimbus. Our earlier storm could be one of these afternoon successes, a cumulus tower that manages to tap into the full depth of instability and grow a broad anvil. Around it, others are trying and failing, like quiet auditions for the same role. Radar operators watching in distant offices see dots and patches forming and disappearing on their screens. Meteorologists trace their histories, labeling each cell, calculating lifetimes and paths. You, on the ground, might notice only that the light changes, the air stirs, and a shower passes. In the late afternoon and early evening, the day's heat peaks and then begins to decline. Thunderstorms that formed earlier either fade or they organize into lines and clusters. Some may merge, feeding on boundaries where outflows collide. Others remain solitary, living out their brief lives in a single burst of rain and thunder. From the vantage point of a satellite, the continent is dotted with bright coal tops and spreading anvils. From the vantage point of your window, it is just one storm at a time. As evening deepens, the ground cools. Without strong surface heating, new storms become less likely, unless they are forced by larger scale features like fronts or jets aloft. Existing storms may continue as longer-lived systems, their cores fueled by dynamics on scales bigger than any one updraft. But even these eventually weaken. By late night, many regions have returned to calm, with only thin decks of cloud and the occasional light shower drifting by. The atmosphere settles into a gentler rhythm, ready to start the process again tomorrow. All of this can be happening during a single day while you go about your routines. You might experience no storms at all, even though the larger map is alive with them. Or your town might host several, each one a short chapter in the bigger story of the season. Taken together, they form a quiet background pulse. Convective breath in, convective breath out. Storm days building and clearing, like a slow planetary heartbeat. Let us visit 3 different places under the same long line of storms, not through dramatic impact, but through the soft details of how each place feels. First, a small town on the plains. A few streets, low houses, trees lining the sidewalks, grain silos standing watch at the edge of town. The air is hot and still. Somewhere to the west, a squall line has been marching along for hours. By the time it reaches this town, the anvil is already overhead, casting a wide, diffuse shadow. Children playing outside notice the change in light before they notice anything else. A breeze picks up, first gentle, then a little stronger, as the gust front approaches. Trees rustle, signs creak softly. The first large raindrops arrive, spaced far apart, darkening the pavement in scattered spots. Then the main curtain sweeps in, turning the view down the street into a slightly blurred grey tunnel. People step onto porches, under awnings, into doorways, watching quietly. Inside one house, someone might be doing exactly what you are, listening to the rain, feeling the temperature drop slightly, counting the time between distant flashes and the arriving thunder, not out of worry, but out of habit. The storm passes in 20 or 30 minutes, leaving behind a glistening street and a calm evening sky. A local life touched briefly by a much larger system. Now follow the same squall line as it reaches a city. The streets here are busier. Buildings rise higher. Surfaces are made of glass and steel and asphalt. The urban heat island has kept the air here a little warmer into the evening, and rising thermals over the city may have shaped the storm's path slightly. From the perspective of radar, it is simply one more patch of higher reflectivity. From the ground, it is a change in how the rain sounds, echoing between walls and roofs. On balconies and at windows, people glance up as the wind shifts. Construction cranes in the distance fade behind a sheet of grey. Traffic noises soften as rain begins to drum on cars and roads. Somewhere high in an apartment tower, someone sits near the glass, watching droplets trace downward paths, leaving temporary trails. The sky flashes white for a moment, reflections multiplying in nearby windows. A few seconds later, the muffled roll of thunder folds into the city's constant hum. And finally, the same line reaches a patch of forest and lakes far from towns. Here, there are few artificial lights, and the sounds of the storm mix with the calls of insects and frogs. The gust front arrives as a rush through branches and leaves, turning the canopy into a single vast instrument. Rain filters down through needles and broad leaves, dripping from one layer to another before reaching the forest floor. On the surface of the lake, drops stitch a pattern of expanding circles that overlap and vanish. The storm's passage is written in ripples and rings rather than in traffic patterns or street reflections. In all three places, it is the same storm system, the same broad line of rising and falling air, traced by radar as a continuous feature. But the experience is different in each setting: plain, city, forest. Three different small slices of the same atmospheric life. Three different quiet rooms where someone might be falling asleep to the same rain. Now we step back again, not just from one storm or from one region, but from the entire planet. Imagine viewing Earth from high above, at night, the dark side turned toward you. You see faint clusters of city lights outlining continents. Between them, over oceans and sparsely populated land, the darkness seems deeper. But here and there, in scattered patches, something flickers. Tiny bursts of light deep inside cloud tops. The soft glow of lightning diffused through anvils, far from any human street lamp. These are thunderstorms, living their short lives in the global night. At any moment, there are thousands of storms around the planet in different stages of their life cycles, some just beginning, with fresh cumulus towers forming over warm ground in the late afternoon. Some maturing, raining heavily over distant fields and cities, their gust fronts pushing out cool air. Some dissipating, unravelling into thin decks of cloud as they give up their structure and fade into the background sky. If you could hear them all at once, the combined sound would be a low, unbroken murmur. But from where you are, you only ever hear a tiny piece of that chorus. Over land, many of these storms follow a daily rhythm. They arise in the afternoon and early evening, when solar heating has done its work and surface air is ready to rise. By night, many of them have either decayed or merged into larger systems travelling along broader currents. Over oceans, the patterns can be different, with storms sometimes favouring the late night and early morning hours. Every region has its own preferred timing, its own atmospheric schedule. Your sleep, whether you notice it or not, is always taking place against this backdrop of quiet global activity. When you lie down and close your eyes, storms may be forming somewhere far over the sea. Others are fading in mountain valleys. Others are marching across distant plains as organised lines. Your own sky may be perfectly clear, or it may be hosting its own small storm, like the one we followed from first tuft of cumulus to final drop of rain. Either way, you are being carried through the night by an atmosphere that is always in motion, always adjusting, always breathing. Now bring the view all the way back down, into a single room, into the place where you are resting. Outside your imagined window, the sky is dim. Clouds move slowly overhead, their shapes barely visible against the deeper grey of the night. You may hear rain, or you may simply think of it. Soft, even drops, with no sudden bursts. A background texture rather than a spotlight event. The perfect companion for drifting. Notice your breathing. Without changing it, just observe how it feels. As air flows in, think of the developing stage of a storm. Gentle rising. Soft preparation. As air flows out, think of the dissipating stage. Rain falling. Energy releasing. Everything settling again. Each inhale can be a tiny cumulus tower, rising quietly over warm ground. Each exhale can be the cooling downdraft that brings rain and calm. Inhale, forming. Exhale, fading. Forming, fading. The simple life cycle of a thunderstorm mapped gently onto the rhythm of your body. If any thought flickers like lightning, bright and insistent, you do not have to chase it. You can let it be like a flash behind distant clouds. Notice it. Count a few beats of thunder afterward if you like. Then let it fade into the general murmur of the mind. Thoughts rise and fall, just like storms. They do not need you to hold them in place. Back at my desk, the case file on the life of a thunderstorm is almost complete. Outside the imaginary window, the storm we have been watching has fully dissipated. The sky is patchy now, with remnants of cloud drifting in slow, high bands. The ground is wet, reflecting faint lights in puddles. The air is cooler and cleaner than it was in the heavy stillness before the storm. Small sounds have returned. Distant cars. A door closing somewhere. Insects beginning to call, tentatively at first, then with more confidence. If you listen carefully, you might still hear the occasional drip from a branch, or the last faint trickle in a gutter. These are the final echoes of the storm's life. Not the shouts, not the flashes, but the quiet after. The part that often goes unremarked, but that lasts the longest. Inside the file, I jot one last note in the margin. Life cycle complete. Cumulus, mature, dissipating. Energy moved, air cooled, everything returned to calm. I close the folder, but outside, somewhere beyond this small window on the world, another storm is already beginning. A new parcel of air is rising. A new cloud is forming. The great, gentle machinery of the atmosphere continues its work. You do not need to track it. You are allowed to rest. Let your thoughts move like those droplets and currents, rising for a moment, then drifting down again, forming little clouds of memory or image, and then dissolving harmlessly, leaving the sky of your mind clearer each time. If a worry appears, let it be like a small, isolated cell far on the horizon. It can live its little life without coming near you. You are in the calm after the storm. The case file is shelved, the instruments are quiet. The window is closed, but the memory of cool, rain-washed air lingers. You have all the time you need now to drift into sleep at your own pace. Nothing in this story is urgent. Nothing demands a response. The storms of the world will continue their quiet work while you rest. If you are still awake, you can replay any part of this life cycle in your mind. The first small cumulus, the tall, towered cloud drawing breath, the gentle roar of rain in the mature stage, the fading showers, and the calm that follows. Whichever image feels most soothing, you can stay with it. The story does not require you to reach its end, and if your eyes are already heavy, you can let them close now. Let your breathing settle into its own simple cycle, in and out, like air rising and falling in a storm. Inhale, the building stage. Exhale, the release, the gentle rain, the quiet after. Each breath another small thunderstorm that forms and fades without effort, always returning to stillness. I will stay by the window a little longer, keeping an eye on the sky. You, for now, can set the case file aside. You have walked with one storm through its entire life. That is more than enough for tonight. Rest while the clouds quietly rearrange themselves above a sleeping world. Good night.